In today's reading, a bold claim is made about Jesus that's going to change the way you see God. Welcome to day one of the Gospel of John book club.
So we're going to be reading from the Gospel of John, chapters 1, verses 1 to 18. So let's get into it. In the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's deep. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. I like that. God sent a man, John the Baptist. My accent came out, sorry. John sent a man, I'm so sorry.
You want to pick up? God sent a man, yes. John the Baptist.
Okay, John
Now,
the Baptist.
just a quick point about John the Baptist. John the Baptist versus John. We're reading from the Gospel of John.
Okay.
John the Baptist is not the writer.
I used to think that.
So John the Baptist is a different John. We will be introduced in a couple days to the actual John the writer.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so verse 6. God sent a man,
John the Baptist, to tell about the light so that everyone might believe because of his testimony. John himself was not the light. He was simply a witness to tell about the light. The one who is the true light, who gives light to everyone who was coming into the world.
There it goes.
He came into the very world he created, but the world didn't recognize him. He came to his own people, and even they rejected him. But to all who believed him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. They are reborn, not with a physical birth resulting from human passion or plan, but a birth that comes from God. So the Word became human and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness. And we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. John testified about him when he shouted to the crowds, "This is the one I was talking about when I said, 'Someone is coming after me who is far greater than I, for he existed long before me.' From his abundance, we have all received one gracious blessing after another. For the law was given through Moses, but God's unfailing love and faithfulness came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but the unique one, who is himself God, is near to the Father's heart. He has revealed God to us."
Yeah, this
That's
is just
deep.
so powerful. This is so powerful. And I
amazing.
think there's just so many things to take away here. And during these 60 days, book club sessions, when we do the daily readings, we're not going to try to unpack everything, but we just want to maybe take away some key ideas. And I just love how it starts in the beginning. The Word was already existed. The Word was God. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then if you then it talks about who the Word was, and it gives some more of the characteristics, how God created everything to him. So we see God, and then we see the Word. Is like, well, who's this Word? Because he keeps talking about how then the Word is also akin to the light, and how the light shines in the darkness. And then God sends a man, right, to testify about this light. So the Word, the light, this is the same person he's talking about. And I love how it gets down to verse 14, which is so pivotal. It says the Word became human and then made his home amongst us, right? And so it's like, okay, well, who is this Word? And for those of us who've read the Bible over the years, I think we know who he's talking about. But then he gets down to verse 17, and it says, in verse 14, he became human, made his home amongst us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. And now he's getting real specific. And in verse 17, the Word is revealed to be Jesus Christ. God's unfailing love and faithfulness came through Jesus Christ. He became human. And then I love what verse 18 says. And this, I think, if you take nothing away from it, if this is your first time reading through the Gospel of John, take this away. No one has ever seen God. Have you seen God?
No.
No, I ain't seen God. Okay, cameraman, you seen God? No, cameraman ain't seen God either. No one has ever seen God, but the unique one, the Word, the light, who John is talking about, who is himself God. We gotta understand that, right? That the one that is being talked about, Jesus Christ, is not just the Son of God, right? But he's the only one who has seen God and is what? He himself
Is God.
He is God. We have to understand that Jesus is God, right? And he's also at the same time simultaneously. So he's human and he's God, and then he's also one with the Father and one his own personality, right? And near to the Father's heart. And the beautiful thing about this is where it ends in verse 18 is that he is the one who reveals God to us. So we don't see God. We've never seen God. But when we see Jesus, when we look at Jesus, we begin to understand God. So as we read through the Gospel of John, it is so important that we understand Jesus, because for us to understand Jesus means that we're now understanding God. And if anybody's ever wondered, like, man, God is just abstract. You know, like, how do you know God? And just all these things about God. We read about Jesus. The Bible is literally saying to us, as we understand Jesus, we understand God, right? And so as we read through the next few days, the next 60 days, we're going to understand God through a human lens, through the lens by which we can understand, you know. Otherwise, God remains abstract to us.
That's awesome. You know, it says something in there about this idea of being reborn. Like,
yeah.
What do you mean, like, reborn? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, and in verse 12 it says he came to 11. You know, it says his own people rejected him, right? But then in verse 12 it says, but for those who believed in him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. And I think we all have this, you know, in society there's this idea, Charity, that well, we're all children of God, and the Bible doesn't you know, say that. That's not what the Bible's saying. Scripture tells us that we're not all children of God. We all have the right to become children of God, but the right to become children of God comes through one way and one way only. And it's here in verse 12, all who believes in him and accepts him, he gave the right to become children of God. And then there's a rebirth. So when you become a child, there's a physical birth, right? And the scripture is telling us is that, you know, when we encounter Jesus, if we choose to accept him and we choose to believe in him, so as you go through the Gospel of John over these 60 days, if you choose to believe in him, you get the right to become a child of God. And then becoming a child, like just like when you had, you know, all your children, all of our children, right?
All of them.
They just kind of came in, you know what I mean? There's a birth that happens.
They didn't just come in.
There was some work, right? There was some work. But I like how the scripture says they are reborn. So just like we had a natural birth, there's a new birth that happens. There's a spiritual birth, right? It's not a physical birth resulting from human passion, you know, love making, right? Or a plan of human beings, but a birth, scripture says, a birth that comes from God. So a lot of people like to say, you know, I'm spiritual, but I think the scripture says, no, we're only spiritual if we're reborn of God. We're reborn of God through what? Believing and accepting the one who came.
You know, I'm very, like, I was kind of excited about how John is presenting this thing. It's like, oh no, Jesus is God. It's like, whoa, right? Like, he's actually saying that. It sounds a little fantastical, but it's like, no, he's declaring that Jesus is God. So how can we follow John's example in this moment, where sometimes right now we're afraid to even say Jesus, and sometimes we shy back. Now we're saying God to mean everything. Like, how important is it for us as believers to say Jesus is God?
Yeah, I think it's the difference, and this is going to sound really pivotal, but it's the difference between life and death.
Okay, so what do you mean by that? What do you mean?
Right, because, okay, so, and we haven't gotten there, so I don't want to spoil it, but essentially Jesus coming to the earth is God coming to the earth to save a fallen earth, a fallen mankind, right? So he created us, and then, so we were all born, right? And then there was a fall, and, you know, so we see how bad the world is, right? And I think what God is saying here is, no matter how bad your situation is, no matter how rough things get, he's inviting you to become part of his family. You can be part of the family of God by believing in Jesus and accepting what he's done. And we're going to read about what he's done, okay? And God is going to give you a spiritual birth and a new life. And I believe that new life invigorates us to be changed and to be the kind of people and to live the kind of life that God had originally intended before our darkness, which scripture talks about, came into the picture.
That's awesome. I'm excited for the next 59 days.
see you day 2.